Welcome to episode 2 of Hogging the Mic, the Boar's brand new podcast, bringing you student journalism like you've never heard it before. Today, we've got an exclusive interview with a Warwick and Boar legend. But before we get on to that, it's time for us to spotlight our favourite stories from this week at the Boar.
A week ago, we officially launched the podcast, and we just wanted to say a massive thank you for all the support we've received, from a little seed of an idea to a project launch on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. We're very grateful of all the support and hope you enjoyed the first episode.
According to Spotify, we've had listeners from the UK, Italy, France, the US, and even Jordan. So thank you, everybody who has listened from wherever you are in the world. We really appreciate it.
We've got lots more episodes coming, so keep tuned.
And following on from that episode where you got to know a bit about us, it's time for an episode which follows our usual podcast structure.
Every episode will be highlighting our favourite stories from the Boar that week, taking a look at what's been getting people talking on campus and what stories have caught our eye.
While we may still be in the summer break, that doesn't mean things have slowed down at the Boar, and there's still some fantastic stories to be told and celebrated. Of course, it's also a busy time at the paper as we prepare for our first print edition of the year, which will come out in Freshers Week, so make sure you're keeping an eye out on the section's WhatsApp groups for print pictures. But first, let's dive into the stories from this week. Shall we start with news?
Absolutely. So there's been a lot of stories in news this week. We published a lot of stories, which has been always great to see. And we've had an article about job cuts at UK universities. There was a great article which unpacked a call from the UCU boss to the UK government to stop obstructing, as they put it, Gazan students from taking up UK university offers due to a lack of access to visa processing centres. So definitely go and check those articles out. But the article I have chosen, which I think is quite an interesting one as we head towards the academic year, is Tilly Dickinson has written an article looking at a new function on ChatGPT, which is a study mode. And it's been reportedly created to encourage responsible academic use. So compared to the usual ChatGPT mode, where you can put in a question and it spits out the answer, this mode talks you through how to get an answer like a tutor would. Which is, so it'll take you through step by step of a maths problem, for example, and instead of giving you the answer straight away, it will give you a method. So it comes at a time when obviously at universities there's been growing concerns about AI. So investigation in The Guardian, which Tilly cited in her article, says that about 5 in 1,000 students were found to have cheated using AI in 2023-2024, which is a significant increase from 1.6 the year before. So the article looks at this new mode and considers whether it's going to be useful going into the new academic year, whether it's going to combat problems with AI in education. So yeah, I thought it was a really interesting read. Definitely go and check it out if you're interested in AI in education. We've covered it a lot in the news section recently. So yeah, I think definitely go and check that article out.
Yeah, really good. And there's always headlines in the news nowadays about the use of AI, particularly in education. So it's great to see Tilly covering a story like this. So for the culture section, we're obviously quite broad. So we've had great stories from the past couple of weeks in the film section. There's been lots of great reviews, and same in music. There's been some really amazing interviews. But the article that I would like to spotlight is from the book section. So at Hogging the Mic, we interview alumni who have entered the world of journalism or who have played a big part within the Boar. But the book section have been interviewing alumni as well. So they have interviewed an alumnus who has entered the world of literature. So the article that I've chosen is from the book section, written by Sophia Hagioanu. So Sophia has interviewed Anna Fiteni, a Warwick graduate who studied English literature and creative writing. And she has recently written, and it is about to be released in October, I believe, her debut novel, which is called The Wicked Lies of Habron Fair. Anna's book is perfect for any romance and fantasy fans, as her debut is in the genre of romantasy, which I believe is quite a popular genre nowadays within sort of the young adult fiction world. And the novel is inspired by Welsh mythology and follows the heroine of the story, Sabrina, into the world of Tyler Teg. So there is plenty of Welsh terminology in there that Tom had to tell me how to pronounce. But it's really great and really great article. And if you would like to support another Warwick alumni, definitely check out Anna's book.
That sounds really interesting. And the article that I've chosen from the sports section is also about a Warwick student. I've chosen an article by Maya Gordon about Helen Trapalides, who has just won MCC Young Female Broadcaster of the Year. This prize will see her join the Sky Sports commentary team for the final of the 100, which will occur on the 31st of August. So make sure you tune in to listen to Helen commentating on the 100. Helen is a writer at The Boar, who we all know very well, and I've definitely edited quite a lot of her pieces for the sports section when I had the role of sport editor last year. So it's really nice to see her be recognised on a national level, and the article by Maya is a really good explanation of the prize and what it means.
Now that we've discussed those stories, it's time to dive into our first interview on the podcast.
So every episode, we'll be bringing you a conversation with someone that's been in the very same place as all of us, involved in the Boar in some way during their time at Warwick. Today, we're bringing you an interview with possibly the biggest Boar legend there is. If you've been involved in the Boar in any way over the last decade, you will know him for sure.
Of course, we're talking about Reece Goodall. It was an absolute pleasure to speak to Reece for this episode of the podcast.
We caught up with Reece earlier this summer, and while Reece may not write for the Boar anymore, he still works at the university and was on campus for the interview.
In true Warwick fashion, there was of course work being done at the university while we spoke to Reece, so you may hear a little bit of background noise from the roadworks. As long as the uni aren't planning on expansion of the forum, I think we're okay.
Sit back, enjoy this interview. It's always an absolute pleasure to listen to Reece's stories. Today's guest is extremely well known within the Boar for all that he's done for the society. He's written over 2,000 articles, which is the Boar record and the National Student Publication record. His most written for section is one which I know very well. That's, of course, sport, which he wrote over 400 articles for. He's held numerous roles in the society, including being a cartoonist, editor and sub-editor. So now that you know quite a bit about his time at the Boar, we're ready to introduce our first guest to Hogging the Mic, the one and only Reece Goodall.
Thank you very much for having me. Phenomenal introduction, my goodness.
I mean, you've done a lot for the Boar, Reece.
No, I've been around a while, but it's strange to hear this sort of stuff later. I didn't realise sport was the winner. I'm surprised by that.
Yeah, we were surprised as well.
Yeah.
So you were writing for the Boar for over 10 years, I think, or nearly 10 years, I think, is what you've said in your farewell letter, which is a great read, your last article. So we know that you've been writing for nearly a decade, but what originally drew you to the Boar?
I'll be honest. So I had two first years at Warwick. In my first year, I'll be honest, the Boar was sort of on the periphery. You know, I saw the papers around campus and stuff. But it wasn't something that really caught my eye because I didn't think I could write particularly. But then sort of at the end of that year, the comment editor at the time put out a call for cartoonists and satirists and sort of artists to sort of complement comment output. And that caught my eye. That was the thing. I'm not the best drawer in the world, but I can sort of, cartoon sufficiently well. So I thought I'd give that a go. So that was how I got involved first, was thinking I would draw a sort of a cartoon every now and again to go along with a news or a comment story. And then I went to a Boar session at the start of my first year, met everyone, and you guys as editors know sort of the needling of getting people to come and write for your section. People needled me and nudged me, and eventually I wrote something, and from that I carried on writing.
Can you remember the first thing that you wrote for the Boar, the first article that was published?
I can, yes. So it was at the time, do you guys know the show 24?
No, not really.
Depressingly young. This spy show with Kiefer Sutherland as Jack Bauer. I used to love it. It was amazing. But anyway, at that time, the show had been off air for years, and they were doing sort of a limited series. So I wrote a sort of a summary of all the series of the show that had happened prior to that. It's not a very good piece. I remember at the time the editors were sort of very strict on word counts, even for the online stuff. So it reads not very well at all, just to fit in 9 series of a show into like 600 words. But yeah, no, that was the very first one, was essentially a recap piece of a show that I wanted to watch.
Nice. Yeah. So if that was number one, but you went on to write over 2,000 articles, as I said earlier. Were there any articles that stood out? Did you have a favourite, and why?
Oh, it's like the sort of picking your favourite child question, Rachel. There have been a few that I think are sort of memorable for me in sort of different ways. So I remember number 1000, which was a piece on Agatha Christie, and then there were none. And I tried to do a sort of a multi-section collab as sort of the 1000th piece. So I wrote a thing on how it had been adapted in different media, the book, the film, TV shows, games, stuff like that. And I remember trying to make that because it was, a marker of 1000, trying to make that something that sort of celebrated different sections and sort of brought together many of the areas and sections that I'd written for. So I remember that because it's the big number. I can't believe I made 2,000. 1,000 felt absurd. And then on a personal note, I wrote a piece for Lifestyle about sort of loneliness, this sort of loneliness epidemic that's sort of afflicting. Can I still call myself a young person? That's afflicting. I was going to say people our age. That might be a bit uncharitable for you guys. And sort of feeling of being lonely even when you're surrounded by people and sort of doing stuff. And I wrote that, and I got a load of people get in touch with me after that. People I knew, people I didn't, to say that the piece had chimed with them and spoken to them. I remember having tried to offer some sort of suggestions of things I'd done to sort of try and feel less lonely, and people saying, thanks for offering advice, as well as sort of speaking to something that was personal to us. So off the top of my head, I think those are the two, and sort of for radically different reasons, the ones that leap out sort of immediately memorable to me.
So, as well as writing over 2,000 articles, you've also been one of the people to complete the Whole Hog. So you've written for every section, which is not surprising, being you've written so many articles. But is there any section you would say that you've particularly enjoyed contributing to the most, more than others?
Yeah, I think so. I have a lot of Whole Hogs on my shelf, Tom. This is as I said at the start, I'm surprised that sport is my most prolific one. I suspect the Olympics I covered during COVID might really push the number up. My first sort of exec role with the Boar was for the TV section, and I loved writing the TV stuff. And then I was games editor for a period, and I loved writing game stuff. I love writing a lot of stuff. There are sections I found harder to write for, because I found that sort of some of the this is what I mean. Sort of my own connection with the subject sort of is less there. I really struggle to write for arts. I think I don't engage with sort of the theatre or stuff like that as often as I do films and games and TV and stuff. And I tried to make an effort to sort of not concentrate on one section particularly. The more I went through the Boar career, as it were. In part to test my own writing. It's easy to fall into the trap of just becoming one writer and being very good at it. So I tried to sort of spread myself around a lot. But yeah, arts I always found tougher. I used to find back when I started, finance a very tough section to get into. I think that was the last thing I had to do to complete my first Whole Hog was a finance article, and I really, really struggled to find a way into it. In the end, what it was a piece on someone had sort of done the economics of building a Death Star from Star Wars. So this is sort of a finance piece I could hook on to. Yeah, it's sort of come in waves, really. There have been points where sort of different sections have spoken to me because there are topics that are of the moment. There are editors who've really sort of come up with pitches that spoke to me. Throughout 10 years, it's very much been ebbs and flows across many sections.
So the Whole Hog, as we all know, the Whole Hog, many people are still competing for the Whole Hog, and I mean, I think 7 sections in at the minute. I ticked finance off, thankfully. I did that in a music club, so that was nice and easy. But bit worried about getting games ticked off. I think that's not my strong point. But obviously, there's a lot of competition on exec to get the Whole Hog. Was there similar competition at the time when you were writing as well, or was it very much just a personal thing for you?
It wasn't really a thing when I started. Back in the day, that's such an old thing to say. At the Boar Awards, there used to be sort of like not an award given out, but sort of like a recognition of people who did it. I think the editor at the time just sort of stood up and there was like a slide on a PowerPoint or whatever, because it wasn't really considered something that people did. I like the spirit that's grown about it, sort of in the years since, people competing to do it. And I think it's really a challenge, sort of a test of sort of your journalism abilities to be able to sort of produce articles for a variety of different sections. This is the thing, I'm assuming you guys are thinking journalism careers, or people listening to this will be thinking journalism careers. And stuff will land on your desk that you'll hate and still have to run with. So it's sort of excellent training in a way to be able to kind of produce a piece on something that doesn't inherently speak to you.
Yeah, and as well as writing for every section, you also held a lot of different roles within the exec, like chief sub, games editor, and also sub editor for different sections. Do you have a particular role that really stood out to you as being your favorite, or again, is it just too difficult to choose?
It's a cruel question, Lucy. It's I think my 2 section editor positions, they were challenges. So in both instances, I came into them at a point where the sections were sort of struggling on account of essentially a load of the sort of key writers had graduated, sort of content was slow, etc. I think I left both sections in a sort of better off place when I left them, and I enjoyed that challenge of inheriting essentially this challenge of you don't really have a stock of stable writers as sort of most sections do. You don't really have any sort of social media activity or anything like that to point to. Good luck was essentially the brief. And running with that and making my sort of 2 sections live was fantastic. That was something I really enjoyed. I think that was perhaps more rewarding as well than sort of coming into a section that was already thriving. And I don't want to say more rewarding. It's a different type of challenge, let me say. But coming into it and realizing that I had to be a proactive editor to be able to make the sections work, I think really set the bar for sort of the way that the sections developed. I had fun with these other things. I was chief sub during the first COVID lockdown. That was something. But just different times, different challenges in all of them. I think the section editor ones are probably some of the more fun and varied ones, I would say.
So obviously you've mentioned that you were games editor in your final year of your PhD at Warwick, which must have been a big challenge. I think we all struggle being an editor in our second year or our third year, but I can imagine it was quite hard in the final year of what was probably quite a challenging PhD as well. Did you enjoy that challenge alongside your PhD? Did you find anything quite difficult at the time balancing that and your PhD?
Yeah, a little bit. I'll be honest, sort of final year of PhD is not really sort of the busiest point of the PhD. It's kind of sort of just the writing up and last minute amendments and setting up. If I'd come on earlier, it might have been more of a push. I think doing TV in the final year of my undergrad was probably more of a time management challenge, I would say. It was fun. I don't think I'd have been able to do it though had I not already had the experience I had. I think it would have been too much to come in sort of as a completely blind section editor, as well as finishing the PhD. That I'd been a section editor before really helped, and of course having the amazing team that I had as well. I was essentially given a team, just because I think I came in partway through the year. There wasn't time to recruit a sub and deputies and stuff. So being given sort of infrastructure, being given amazing people to work with, made it a comparatively easy experience, really, I think. I'm sure those guys at the time might be remembering it differently. But yeah, it was tough. I mean, I think though, sort of coming onto a job like a section editor at any point in your degree is a tough one if you sort of have no semblance of time management. You really need sort of, and it's a learning curve, obviously. I'm not saying people step in on day one and are brilliant, but it is a challenge. You're essentially working what? If you're a good proactive section editor who gets lots of content, who is good with the depths and good with the section sub, it is a full-time job essentially in itself alongside the other stuff you're doing. So I think it's really tough at any point, and it's a learning curve. And I think the best section editors in my time are the people who've really sort of figured out a way to make it work.
Yeah. And another thing with the games section, but also the TV section, you briefly touched upon it before, is that they are sections that aren't written for as much. I think me, Rachel and Lucy have had the experience in news, music, sport, 3 sections that are a bit more active in the Boar. Was there any way that you found was better to recruit writers? Was there any effective strategies you thought you were able to use to get those writers into the lesser written sections as well?
Yeah, no, that's an excellent question, Tom. I'm of the view that proactivity breeds activity. People want to join sections, writers want to join sections, be part of sections that they see, that they know if they send something in, it will appear sort of soon. It's sort of, I think, sort of a key, you need to be active. People, if you look at a section and you see that sort of it only limits out an article once a month and the editor doesn't respond to emails and there's never any media, whatever, it's not really an attraction to want to write for. You'd have sort of less confidence in that if you were looking from the outside in. So I tried to be sort of uber proactive with the section. I tried to make sure we had a lot of content. I wrote a lot of content. I made sure that stuff went up like within a day of us receiving it. I probably drove my teams quite hard, but I wanted the section to look alive, and really that translated into people getting involved. I made sure sort of in every social I was there sort of singing the praises of my respective sections. When I was TV editor, Twitter was the big thing. We were very, very uber active on Twitter, and we tried to latch on to TV events as well to sort of look alive. We latched onto the Love Island finale. We latched on to when Jodie Whittaker was announced as the next Doctor. And we sort of broke that news and was shared by sort of like thousands of people because we were one of the first people. I was there watching Wimbledon ready on the keyboard. So it's just stuff like that, really. It's sort of essentially just not letting stuff linger. There was a point, so both these sections, I admit, obviously, I'm an unusual case in that I can sort of pump out content like a factory. But we were getting to the stage where we were sort of having an article online every single day. We were shouting about it on the media every day. I got the main Boar account as well to share stuff for us. So it was really a matter of creating the impression, almost creating the illusion that the sections were alive and thriving and pumping out stuff. And then from that, they became sections that were alive and thriving and pumping out stuff that wasn't just my stuff. So this is what I would say to any person who's thinking about running to be an editor or doing editorial experience. Anyone who might be an editor now, and if you want people to write for your section, be on it. Essentially, don't let articles linger. This is something that always used to frustrate me. Is you'd send something in that was time critical, and then it would appear 2 weeks later, and I never got the logic. And obviously, I know people are busy and that sort of stuff. but then that sort of kills the relevance of an article. It kills the buzz about it from the writer. And it's a bit of damp, and no one's going to read it when it lands. It's sort of the worst of all worlds. So yeah, that's very much the advice. Just sort of be proactive and on it. Would be my top tip.
So that's kind of your more advice for editing a section and holding that position. But you also held the position of chief sub
Yes.
during a kind of strange year. It was 2020, 2021. So COVID year, there were no physical editions of the Boar, and we all know that that's a very big part of writing for the paper and editing for the paper. Editors were separated at homes and stuck in uni accommodations. What challenges did that year pose, and what was it like holding such a big exec role in that year?
Oh, it was tough, Rachel. It was a challenge. For the chief sub role, it arguably made things a little more streamlined almost. What I did in my role, we would have sort of infrequent online exec meetings, although really things were sort of delegated to an exec chat because, as you say, papers weren't appearing, socials weren't happening really, stuff like that. So online content really became the order of the day. And what I would do as chief sub was essentially just check online on the Boar website each morning. And if anything new had appeared, I would just give it a once over. And that seemed to work fine. That was a setup that worked quite well. My team of section sub-editors were really on it. I think, if I'm honest, we were all sort of struggling for stuff to do during the lockdown. I wrote a lot of articles just because you had to fill the day somehow when we weren't allowed to do anything else. So it was a challenge. I think some of the section editors at the time had it tougher because stuff wasn't happening. People, I don't know, new music wasn't being released, sporting events weren't really happening, games weren't being released. So I think it was those guys that had it tougher during the sort of the COVID period. And the chief sub role broadly went on as it did anyhow, without the stress of having to sub-edit the entire physical paper. And annoyingly, they made it a senior exec role after I finished. I think they recognised the importance of sort of having the sort of that figure as a sort of a key role. But I never got to benefit from that, sadly. That was a cruel blow.
Yeah, I didn't know that it wasn't any senior exec role. That's really interesting. We've mentioned before about the Boar Awards. So you've been nominated for 20 Boar Awards, which is a massive number, and you've won 9. Is there a particular Boar Award that you're proud of?
I'm like Meryl Streep. It's absurd. I suppose the first. I wonder if there was this bit. So back in the day, we had sort of each section would give out 2 awards, and it would give out. This was my first Boar Awards, and they would give out, I think, a sort of a writer of the section, and then a sort of a one for the best article. They stopped doing that, I think, because it was a lot of awards and a bit arbitrary to choose sort of the writer of the section in cases. But I remember I went to that and I'd just started writing for Lifestyle. I'd done some sort of silly pieces, essentially. One about, was it the relationship agreement from the Big Bang Theory as a sort of this perfect tool of romance, and some questions on dating and stuff. And I went to the first Boar Awards, and then I won Writer of the Year for Lifestyle, and it really threw me. I still remember that. The editor at the time, Lizzie Pugsley, invited me up to the front. And there's a photo of me and her, and she's smiling, and I look just baffled. I don't know where that photo is, but they sort of... She held on to it and sent it to me at random points whenever I looked confused in an exec meeting. There was that. Then I suppose sort of when I won the sort of the Lifetime Achievement Award, that was quite nice. And that was the year that I was TV editor. I was up for Outstanding Contribution again. I'd won it a few years prior for, I think, doing the Whole Hog. I think it shows you how the standards have changed in terms of what constitutes an outstanding contribution. I won that, and I went along, and I wasn't expecting to win anything because I'd already won an outstanding contribution. There was a list of amazing people who had been nominated, all of whom, would have been brilliant, amazing winners. So they did the outstanding contributions, and it was lovely. I think at the time I was on sort of 300 articles or so. They did the outstanding contributions, final award of the night, and then they were like, but hold on, we've got one more. Murmurs and whispers in the room. And then suddenly I'm invited up there to get sort of a very lovely piece of glassware for the Lifetime Achievement Award. And that was really nice. I was completely thrown because I didn't even know that was going to happen. The rest of them, nominations, you're in for it or you're not, as is the way. But that completely floored me. I was so stunned to be recognised in this sort of extra bonus way. And amongst sort of, the exec that I'd been part of, amongst writers that I'd grown to sort of call my friends, that was a really special night and a special occasion. So that probably, Lucy, is what I would say is the answer. I've still got that as well, on my shelf still.
And I mean, everyone at the Boar now knows you as a bit of a Boar legend. I think your name is still banded around the offices as a bit of like this. Reece Goodall is the great man of the Boar, and it's no surprise as well, the amount of articles you've written. But that impact as well has led to the Lifetime Achievement Award being named after you. I mean, at Boar Awards this year, we all heard your voice coming through at the micropug, which was a great experience as we were tucked in the corner. It's like you were in the room. But how did that come about that the award was named after you? And is that another thing you're proud of as well?
That's an honour. That's really very touching. Yes, so that came about. So they gave me that award, and then I don't think they did Lifetime Achievement for a year or two. And then it was the time that Dan Rubin and Elliot Mulligan were the editors, EICs that is, and they had been on exec with me when I was TV editor. Oh no, maybe it wasn't next year. I don't know. When you get old, sort of years fade into they all fade into one. Yes, and so I think it was them. They wanted to sort of bring it back and have it as an award at the ceremony. They invited me to present it because I'd won the first one. I hadn't realised that they'd named it after me until I turned up on the night and they gave it to me to give to the person who won, Amy Kinman. Who's amazing, DIC for physical media and SciTech editor, and she's off in America in some sort of amazing research lab now. The path this journalism takes you. So it came from that, and that was a lovely night. I got to give it to someone who was sort of an amazing friend. And then EICs kept coming back to me and getting me to choose. I didn't like the pressure of having to pick who sort of the outstanding achievement was, lifetime achievement was. But it's done from that, and it is really nice. It's nice that people keep asking me to sort of present this. It's nice that I get to reflect on people who've given a lot to the paper as well. It's now emerged into the sort of, you're out the door of the Boar, you're out the door of Warwick Award. Thank you very much, which is nice. And all the winners thus far have been people who've done amazing things over years with this paper, and in different ways. Sadia, Seven, Amelia, Emily, and then Luke and Katie this year. People who've spent years as part of this society, who've helped move it to new heights in terms of both as a paper, but also as a society. And to be able to recognise people who are doing sort of inspiring things. Under the banner of myself, which is strange, but to sort of have me positioned as sort of a marker of people who are doing such incredible things, who are doing things far more incredible than I think I ever did, is really humbling for me, I think. It's humbling and it's honouring to get to sort of present year after year.
And as well in the Boar, we have the Boar Awards, and then we also have SPA, which is
Yeah.
the other big competition for journalists, student journalists. That's now something that a lot of our writers aim for, is to get nominated or awarded a SPA. Was this something that you ever aimed for when you were writing, or were you not too concerned about gaining a SPA award?
To be honest, I'd never heard of them until when I was TV editor, and then we got sort of the exec meeting. I'm sure you have all been part of, where the EIC stand at the front and say you've got to choose which articles and people you're going to nominate. I think weary nods. I had no idea what they were, so I'd never been pushing for them because I didn't know it was a thing. I think one of the articles I put forward, it won a regional one or a national one, I don't remember which, and that was Catherine Sorab on there was an autistic character introduced to Sesame Street, and it was sort of a personal reflection, and it was really good. I'm glad it was recognised. I'd never really gone for it, and I have no idea if I've been put up for them. My record, after the incredible sort of numbers and stats that you've listed, my SPA record is a poor one. And I was nominated once for the Billy Dowling Reed Award for Outstanding Contribution, which was, again, really, really touching. That was an honour. I went to Glasgow, didn't win it, sadly. But yeah, other than that, I've had sort of no real involvement with the SPAs. This has been, I suppose, because I was never really thinking of a journalism career. I suppose it's the kind of thing that if you have on your CV and you're planning to look into journalism, etc., having an SPA or two, even nominations, having that in the bank is a very, very useful thing. But I just sort of wrote for the fun of it. The Society Awards are different because that's your friends and it's a collective thing, and it's sort of. But the national awards, all the regional ones, I should say, I never really chased those. I say that like I chased the Boar Awards. I didn't chase those either. But I was never too sort of heartbroken about not picking up anything there.
You just spoke a little bit and addressed the fact that you weren't ever really thinking about entering journalism as a career. As we know, you're currently working at Warwick. If you can hear the building work in the background, that's because it's summer, and yeah, there's lots of construction going on around campus. Like you said, you weren't considering entering journalism, but was there any part of you that wanted to go down that route while you were writing for the Boar, or became slightly interested in it?
It's a good question, Rachel. Obviously, when you're there, it's in your head. I think, and the paper at the time, and still does, runs amazing sessions with alumni, with people who work in the industry, news associates, and all that crowd. I went to these things. I think we had shorthand training as well, sort of professional shorthand training, the software, not the writing, back when I was TV editor. And so I went to these things with a view of almost sort of dipping your toe into the pool, because it's worth taking advantage of opportunities that come your way. And I enjoyed some of this stuff, but I couldn't ever really see myself going that way, I think. It was always something that's in your head, because when you're working in a newspaper, when you're doing journalism, how could you not think of doing more journalism? But I don't know. I think some sort of people have the calling almost. There's this sort of the feeling that drives you inside, and I don't think I quite had that in the same way that a lot of people in the paper had. Mine was sort of the curiosity of learning new things, but I don't think I had it in me to be a sort of on-the-ground reporter or anything along the lines of looking at you three, the things that I think drive you and the others that I've seen on the paper. I don't think I quite have that in the same way.
But still, I mean, what you've gone on to do is you've still gone on to do so much within the university, and we know you've gone on to become this presence in the Boar still. So you've clearly had a benefit from the Boar. And would you say there are benefits to student journalism for those who aren't considering journalism as a career? And what are they, if you think there are?
Oh, absolutely, yes. No, I mean, there are so many benefits. I would say, as I said, the amount of things I've learned from writing articles and the amount of opportunities I've had. I've been to events, I've seen plays and films and got to play games before they're out and stuff like that. The amount of doors that are open just by agreeing to write something is incredible. Past that, I mean, in a sort of specifically university context, the things it teaches you about writing and editing and time management and communication are all sort of invaluable skills for a degree and for further afield. I would say the challenge is if you get more fully involved, you become part of the exec in whatever capacity. The experience of working as a team, is sort of being part, I was going to say a cog, that sounds very reductive, but being part of a unit that sort of contributes to something bigger, and having things that you can point to at the end, be that, you know, an event you've run, be that an article you've published, be that a page that you've laid up, and having those examples as things that you can point to down the line and say, I'm able to do stuff and I have evidence that shows I can do stuff. You know, the very cynical sort of employment talk that comes, but, you know, having sort of concrete examples of things you can point to and say, I'm able to do things and I can prove that. You know, the paper gives you that. And then also, I'd say sort of the friends and connections I've made along the way. Yeah, I'm still in touch with, you know, I've been around a long time, as has been remarked upon. I'm still in touch with a lot of the people that I met at the Boar throughout my years, people who've gone on to do amazing, cool things. And the sort of the networking opportunities that arise, yes, with journalists, of course, but then you can get with so many other ways as well. I've been to events where I've got to hobnob with scientists and with actors, with games developers, etc. It really is an amazing tool. I'll speak for the Boar in particular. It's an amazing space that opens the door to so many opportunities. And there are so many different paths you can take within it as well. And I think it really suits people who are particularly proactive and curious and sort of who really want to drive something forward. It's one of the few societies, I think, and I'm not saying this with sort of bias because I was part of it, it's one of the few societies that gives so many spaces, so many opportunities to sort of let you guys make something for yourself, but that is also part of a nationally recognised newspaper, that, you know, the name itself carries a lot of weight, and it's an amazing space to cut your teeth almost, to make the mistakes, but also to sort of do amazing things. So a roundabout way of answering your question, Tom, yes, it's amazing and everyone should do it.
We've obviously spoken a lot about the time that you were involved within the Boar. So it was over a decade, and there were plenty of changes in the world over that time, you know, changes in government, global pandemic, as well as changes within the Boar, plenty of EICs and different people on senior team. What would you say are the biggest changes that you've seen sort of in the Boar over, like, from when you started to now?
Oh, that's a good question. I was worried when you said you'd known many people, you were going to get me to sort of dish the dirt, Lucy. There have been some changes. So the way the paper has evolved, I say this as the physical paper has evolved. And in my time at Warwick, I think it's gone through 3 rebrands. I'm quite a fan of the current one. I think it looks very newspapery. If you haven't seen it, go online to issue.com and the Boar News and find it. It looks very snazzy. So the paper has evolved, and sort of almost the priorities of what goes into it has evolved. There were periods, and of course this changes. Editors have different priorities, and sections necessarily have different priorities. There have been some shifts in terms of things like pullouts and the value of them. There's been shifts in sort of the weighting of sections, and which sections get more space, etc. Sections have appeared and died and come back to life. The bubble section was a new addition in my time, sort of Warwick's social media hub within the physical paper. The puzzle page, of course, the famous puzzle page, with the amazing crossword and sort of the unusually challenging Sudoku. Photography has come and gone a few times. It's back again now, I think.
Yeah.
Yes, not perfect. And of course the emergence of podcasts now as well. So very much keeping finger on the zeitgeist. There's been that. There's been a fair few things have happened. How many general elections have we had since I've been at Warwick? 4.
I think
Yeah.
I think probably 4. Yeah.
Oh my. Yeah, a lot of political shifts and stuff. What have I seen? I've seen Brexit. I've seen COVID. I've seen the Conservatives coming from majority government out of the coalition to being out of office now. Seeing wars and of course sort of I've seen both Trump presidencies. My abiding memory is a lot of protests on campus at sort of any major political news. People on marches and holding up signs and lots of shouting and crying and stuff. I say that not in a judgmental sense, but I remember, was it after the first Trump election, there was sort of like a crying session on the piazza? I'm looking at you guys like you were there. This is you.
Yeah, you probably know better than us on this. Yeah.
Yeah, and then of course the real major shift I think that sort of is I'm not saying these things aren't relevant, but is particularly relevant to sort of this context is the way that higher education has changed during my time here. So the trebling of fees happened just as I started uni. Thank you very much there to the government. But increasing questions about sort of what it means to be a student or what it means to come to university now. It feels I work with students now, as is my job, and it feels a much tougher situation, I think, for people who are coming now in terms of what opportunities are actually able to be offered, in terms of the balance between sort of fun stuff and degree stuff and thinking about the future stuff. It feels like the fun stuff has sort of been waylaid a little bit because everyone is very focused on what comes next. And then shifts in kind of sort of the international tapestry of what makes up universities. We've seen sort of changes with America, with Ukraine, with sort of the Asian market is Warwick's next sort of, it's where it's focusing at the moment. So we're likely to see changes in terms of sort of student makeup there in the coming years. So it's a place that's sort of always in flux. There's always, I was going to say there's always a crisis. There is always a crisis, but then there's also always sort of lots of positive, amazing stories that emerge too. The appearance of the Faculty of Arts building, for example, the hub for art students. The way in which the uni has responded to the Ukrainian crisis and the war in Ukraine by sort of summer school opportunities and support programs for Ukrainian scholars and students. So there's always flux, really, and there's always good and bad. Really, it's incumbent on sort of the uni, but also sort of the students and sort of the next generations as they come, to sort of drive the space to make Warwick, or to make the Boar if they get involved, to make whatever societies they do, their departments, and sort of evolve and change with the times and sort of lead the way into the future. Sorry, I'm sounding like a motivational speaker.
I mean, just then you've touched on all of the events that have happened and a lot of the things that you will have covered. I mean, now we are still covering events that are happening now, like student protests and things. And I know that I personally have learned a lot from covering these events. What's the biggest lesson that you've learned whilst being at the Boar, whilst writing at the Boar?
Oh, the biggest lesson. That's a tough question, Rachel. I suppose, that is a good question. I've learned a lot from being at this newspaper, from writing. And I suppose a key piece of advice that I would take away is to sort of back yourself. No one rocks up doing something like this fully formed, really. And no one is ever fully formed. You know, we are always learning. We're always sort of discovering new things. We're always figuring out new ways of sort of making our practice better. And there will always be someone new to talk to. There will always be someone who knows something that you don't. So sort of acknowledging that, but also acknowledging that sort of I was going to say we're pretty good. That we wouldn't be doing stuff like this if we weren't able to do it. You know, there are people in this newspaper that have driven sort of national news stories from Warwick SU, you know, from those two offices in the building. There are people who have sort of really shifted the conversation on national and in some cases international issues. So really not being afraid to back yourself, letting your work speak for itself. And it's tough, especially when you start. It's tough to produce work, to let it go, to know that eyes will be on it. When negative comments inevitably appear, as they always do, to sort of not take that to heart. The website used to be a much unfriendlier place when sort of comments were not moderated, and it used to be grim, and it used to be hard not to sort of see all the sort of the cruel feedback and think, I'm no good at this. I'd say sort of backing yourself, but acknowledging that backing yourself doesn't mean you know everything. Doesn't mean that you can't learn more. It doesn't mean that you won't make mistakes. Of course we'll make mistakes. You know, even professional newspapers have sort of retractions and clarifications for a reason. So it's sort of trying not to let sort of the potential pitfalls hold you back. And realizing that sort of nothing is ever perfect. You know, there is no such thing as a perfect article. But there are articles that do the job and are done and make an impact. So sort of getting out of your own way a little bit, not letting your ego hold you back, I think. Sorry, that was very long. I don't know it answers your question, Rachel.
Yeah, and I think you've spoken so perfectly there about what you can learn from the Boar and what people go into the Boar and really learn. I mean, I went in as a deputy editor, nearly didn't put an application in, and now I'm a section editor as well. So you really have to use your time at the Boar and really just take all the opportunities you can get. But in that as well, there'll also be things that you regret doing and things that you might have not completed during your time at the Board. I'm sure we'll all have those experiences.
Yeah.
Was there anything that you would have changed during your time at the Board? Is there any regrets you had looking back?
I mean, yes, certainly. I mean, there are a few things I could think. Back in sort of my early writing, I think I tried to write in a way that wasn't me. I think I sort of found my voice as I went along, but you read some of my, I wouldn't recommend reading some of my earlier pieces, but if you read some of them, they read quite radically different to the way that I write now, because I think I was sort of trying to force a persona almost, that, you know, I wasn't a radically different person, but wasn't perhaps authentic. I think being authentic really shines through when you're writing. I say this, and you guys might kill me for saying this. What I do regret is I think I didn't really fully start writing in any sort of substantial level until sort of maybe 3.5 years into my time at Warwick. And I'm of the view that I could probably have written a lot more than I did. I think if I'd have found my output earlier, I could have made 3,000 before I retired. I could have done it. I make that joke. That's not a regret, but I suppose it's a regret that I didn't start earlier. You know, I didn't properly discover the paper. I was too scared, really, to even consider getting involved. In my first year, I got involved very tentatively, and being surrounded by people who were like, "You can do this," really helped. But I was a very slow starter, and I look back now and think, yeah, I could have done a lot more had I not been such a slow starter. So that's probably my sort of biggest regrets, I would say, for the paper. And then perhaps a lot of opportunities appear. There's always a chance to go to an event, to review something, etc. And I don't want to say closed-minded. I've come to sort of be more willing to throw myself into stuff that I don't know about, or stuff that I sort of instinctively would think isn't for me. I'm doing that challenge now where you watch 1,000 films before you die, and watching films that I would never have considered watching otherwise. But that thing of just because you see something and it doesn't immediately speak to you, still being willing to give it a go. I wish that was a sort of an attitude that I'd had earlier as well, because there is some cool stuff that I could have gone to, but just thought, nah, that's not for me, and just immediately dismissed.
Yeah, I think that's quite a big regret for like a lot of people, is not getting involved earlier and kind of only discovering the Boar kind of coming on to the end of first year. And, I think that's quite a big regret for a lot of people. But what would you say would be your main advice then to new Boar writers or people who are, going on to their third year of exec? What's your like biggest piece of advice for anybody involved in the Boar?
I suppose it's just a question of sort of pushing yourself almost. At the end of the day, if you're unsure about writing for this paper or getting involved, go to an event or write an article or whatever. At the end of the day, if it really doesn't chime with you, you get nothing out of it, what really have you lost? You've lost an evening of writing something, you've lost an evening of going to a circle and chatting with some people. I think that's a better thing to lose than sort of a wasted year of being unsure. Similarly, with the with people who are with people who are already there, again, this thing of push yourself in a different way. It's easy almost to be complacent, to be sort of a good writer or a section editor, and sort of rest on your laurels. But the amazing things that happen, being a good contributor or being good involved in whatever sense you're involved, is fantastic. But it can be sort of it can lead to almost sort of stasis. The amazing things that happen come from people who sort of push further. So I'd say is if you're if you're already there and thinking about what comes next, try and ask yourself what's not there. Try and sort of push an idea, and it might not work. It might work. Sort of always be pushing forward. Try something new, I would say. Knowing that not everything will land. Some people will write an article for the paper and they'll never want to write again. Fair enough. Some editors will try a new series, say, and no one will take the things and it won't work. Fair enough. It happens. It's happened to us all. It happened to me. I tried things in TV that just did not land. Fair enough. You learn stuff from that. But when you try something and it works, when you try something and it sort of ignites a spark in yourself or in the people that you're working with, that is where sort of the new exciting things come from. So I suppose don't be scared to sort of push forward and try things would be sort of the key piece of advice for people at any level.
I think that's great advice. And I mean, it's advice that I wish I could have heard right at the start of my time at the Boar. I came into the Boar, like Lucy was saying, at the end of my first year, and I wish I'd started that earlier. And I think anyone listening to this podcast should really listen to your advice and just really dive in and take on everything that the Boar has to offer. There really is so much there is to have to offer, and we're going to be speaking to so many amazing alumni on this podcast about what they've done during their time at the Boar and what they've gone on to do after. And I hope it can inspire people to really take a step forward and take some time with the Boar. And then maybe someone one day will beat your 2000 article record. I mean, it's up for taking.
Yes. Well, the records are there to be broken. That's the thing, sort of look at people who've done amazing things and then, why shouldn't that be you? I'm not saying that about myself as having done amazing things. I want to stress that. But everyone who's gone on, myself, the people that Tom and Rachel and Lucy will speak to, were people who one day were a student who'd never done anything with the newspaper, who sort of took that first step, who've gone on to be incredible in whatever paths they've pursued. So everyone has to start somewhere.
We'd just like to thank you so much for coming on the podcast today, for being our first guest on this, like you've said about new projects, is our new project, and it's so great to have you involved. And we'd just like to thank you for sharing all your experiences and all your knowledge with us.
Thank you very much. It's been an honour, really, to be here at the inaugural episode, and I'm looking forward to many, many more.
We hope you enjoyed listening to our conversation with Reece.
If Reece inspired you to get more involved in the Boar, section sub-editor applications are currently open. You can find the application link on the Boar's Instagram @WarwickBoar. Feel free to apply even if you've had no experience at the paper before. The applications close at midday on Monday the 1st of September, so you've got just over a week to get your applications in.
And just after that, our next episode will be out on the 4th of September. So keep an eye out on our Instagram to find out more details and for hints on who the next alumni that we interview will be.